Today, we're exploring New York City's natural wonders.
which are, of course, totally invented and built by humans.
Central Park, the Highline, and now so-called Little Island.
Today, the future of New York's natural environment.
I'm Alexa Scordato, and this is Future Forward.
And I'm Steven Rosenbaum. Let us launch. This is going to be just unabashedly fun.
This is one of my favorite topics as a New Yorker.
And there's a purpose, there's a larger technology purpose here, which is that things we take for granted that seem like they happened organically, if you spend a little time journeying through history, as we're going to in the next half hour or so, are not, right? I mean, they're built. They're, by the way, you'll be amused to know that I struggled with what to call the creation of all these things. And I realized in another world, I would have said man-made. But of course, they're not man-made. They're human-made.
Human-made. Good for you, Steve.
I was like, that's a phrase we don't use anymore. Man-made.
We talk so much about digital and what is forward-looking. To think about the past a little bit is good. It's a good change up on Memorial Day weekend.
So let's just start with Central Park, because there's some, I go to Central Park a lot. And my dogs take me to Central Park, and we spend time in Central Park, and we bike in Central Park. And I think of it as, going out in nature, right? Mm-hmm. That's our, which is of course not true.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's all relative. As New Yorkers, some people don't even venture north of 14th Street. And so being all the way up in the 60s, 70s, 80s is actually very adventurous.
All right, but let me just give you some
But data. It's artificial.
Or is it? We'll talk about that in a minute. But, so here's from centralpark.org, 20,000 workers, Irish laborers, German gardeners, and native-born stonecutters reshaped the site. The entire topography, after blasting out rocky ridges with more gunpowder than was later fired at the Battle of Gettysburg. Workers moved 3 million cubic yards of soil and planted more than 27,000 trees and shrubs. So, like, massive construction project.
Yep.
It's not like the earth just laid itself out in this bucolic, wandery pattern. And which I guess I remember, Central Park was also claimed, we won't go into all the history, it took 3 years of legislation, and then eminent domain, where they took away all these people's property and turned it into this massive public park.
Yep.
That would be, for those of you who are playing the libertarian card these days, that would be what we call government.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to think, like, here we are, some members of society completely pushing back on the notion of infrastructure and sort of the size and magnitude of it, but we can do it. Like, the patriotic Alexa is like, anytime we as Americans have committed to a vision, we've done it.
So the other thing about Central Park that's worth remembering is it was New York and the U.S. looking at Europe and their great big public parks.
We had no ego saying like, oh, our parks are better. No, it was like beg, borrow, and steal.
And we wanted a place for wealthy people to parade. We wanted carriage parades, and we wanted it was invented or built or designed or whatever to be this European boulevard of luxury. And then, of course, great side note, to give people something to do besides going to saloons.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a little bit of like, maybe people won't drink so much if they can go. But I just love remembering, as we talk about Memorial Day weekend and being out and the weather that's a little rainy today, but probably gets nicer tomorrow, that like this park isn't a magical, this isn't like, God or nature or whatever philosophical thing you believe in just magically cropping up. It is, in fact, very much the opposite of that. It is a constructed, designed, built environment. And the two names that come up a lot is Olmsted and Robert Moses. And both of them, Olmsted and Moses, put their personal, heavy-handed, but quite brilliant and complicated. We won't do Moses on this show because there's a great big book about Moses himself. But and his name was Moses. The irony, no. But Olmsted in particular, I just think I think it's worth. If you, by the way, for those of you who are listeners and viewers who are not New Yorkers and have not been to Central Park, it's spectacular.
It's one of my favorite places to take visitors. I think the juxtaposition of Times Square and then Central Park is the best.
And it's also, I just think about it from an economic standpoint. If you look at a map, if you look down at New York, if you look at a map of New York, and you look at the size of Central Park, the real estate itself is extraordinarily. I mean, particularly when New York was going through really tough economic times, you have to believe that there were some really good conversations about, hey, what if we sell a chunk of Central Park to developers to make some cash? What if we just carve off from like 100 to 118, or like just take a chunk of it and make it into real estate? Couldn't that have made the city economically whole again?
It's a microcosm of the United States. We have incredible city, but we also have our national parks, and the same argument could be made for so many of those too.
Yeah, but I mean, the country never went bankrupt in the way that the city did. Remember the famous, Washington. I'm actually going to look for some Central Park pictures while we talk.
So I've lived on the Upper West Side on and off for probably a decade. I used to live on 86 in Columbus, and there's a lot of diversity in the park. If you enter sort of near the Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis Reservoir, and you do that one loop, that's about 1.5 miles. But then if you go north of that, it's almost like very dense, rocky, uphill trails. And then you have the Bramble, and then you have the beautiful, what's the castle, Steve? I feel like you were there recently.
Yeah, I don't remember the name of the castle.
But it's not Bethesda Terrace. That's beautiful with a fountain. It's they renovated it recently.
Yeah, no, I don't remember. And I thought I'd have some pictures pulled up, but I'm not going to do pictures because I want to talk. So why this matters is because we're entering a moment in time in which the relationship between our built environment and the natural environment is, I don't want to say at risk because that seems overly dramatic, but changing, right? I mean, even if we slow global warming, there's going to be rising sea levels.
Mm-hmm.
And particularly for Manhattan, which is an island and has water all around it, that promises to be problematic.
Yep.
And scary and bad. And so we're going to end up building, all kinds of ways to push the water back out from lower Manhattan. And either that could be great, big, ugly metal walls, or it could be spectacular bits of new engineering that are, in fact, in and of themselves, great natural environments.
Yep. So what is your favorite part of the park? And if you could change anything about it, what would it be?
It's a little bit of a challenging question. My dogs pretty much drive my park experience, and they have particular, dogs are not allowed on the Great Lawn. And there are little parks employees and little battery powered carts that gently but rather firmly define where dogs can be. So for example, you can have your dogs off leash in Central Park until 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this gathering, particularly on the weekends from 7:30 till about 9 of this, where the park is essentially owned by dogs.
It's
And
pro tip, if you're single and you have a dog in the city, it's a great place to meet people. Or you're just like new to the city.
that's true. And there are dog meetups,
Mm-hmm.
which are quite breedist.
Oh, you mean
So
like
like
the doodles are gonna be here, the mutts are gonna
the
be here.
no, there's no mutt meetup that I'm aware of because we don't call them mutts. That's a PC, not a PC word anymore. Mixed breed, please.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. Mixed breed. And then there's lots of discussion about what mix you have. Uh, but like what's funny is like you'll see all the Great Danes will meet and they'll all be together. So the answer to your question is there are a couple of little fenced in areas in which it's very funny. The parks employees come by with little wire snippers and open up this wire fence and then close it again when the dogs are not allowed in there. So we have a couple favorite over by Turtle Pond, which is over by the castle, which is by Shakespeare in the Park. Our dogs like the turtles very much. They go and visit with them.
Oh, that's fun. Belvedere Castle. There we go.
Belvedere,
Oh my God, that was driving me crazy.
Yeah. Not, by the way, not to eat the turtles, but we commune. We have we have a conversation with the turtles. Nice. Turtles come up, they say hello. The dogs say hi to them. There's a little communication that we're not privy to, but it seems rather like, I think the dogs say something like, wow, you swim. And the turtles say, yeah, you stay on land. And then they go off. But that whole area are kind of the little park areas that wrap around the Great Lawn are all very, very nice. That whole circle is our spot.
Nice.
Yeah. But we like it very much. So with that, shall we move along to the Highline?
Yeah, let's do it.
So I have a great Highline story.
You have so many good stories, Steve.
Well, this is a good one. This is a particularly good one. So many years ago, we were briefly thinking about moving, and our real estate agent at the time said, I want you to come and see this apartment. And so we went with her down to the west side, and it was like a third floor, fourth floor apartment. And we looked out the windows and we said to her, who in God's name would ever buy this piece of crap apartment? It looks out over this rusted piece of crappy rail track.
Oh my goodness, Steve.
And it was so cheap. We could have bought it for like $1.50. And she said, well, there's a rumor they might turn that into a park. And I said, because I am a visionary and have the ability to see into the future, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
I bet you said something along the lines of, and even if they get it done, it's going to finish around the same time that the 2nd Avenue subway line gets done.
Oh, no. I was much more cynical than that. I thought it was just the whole idea. And I said to her, the only thing that I remember saying it quite passionately, the only thing that will happen to this crappy rusted piece of rail yard is someone will eventually take it down. And that will be a massively horrible construction project.
Yeah. That's funny.
Which is a clue, a reminder for those of us that aren't artists or don't think like artists, that the ability to look at a rusted rail track and see it as a park takes extraordinary eyesight and vision in a way that I'm in awe of that.
Yeah. So everyone can probably visualize Central Park, but if you have not visited New York and you've not visited the Highline, you just have to imagine that there is an above the ground structure. And when we say railway, it actually was a railway. You had all of the warehouses in the meatpacking district. In Chelsea, you had the old Nabisco factory, which is now Chelsea Market. And you basically had this railway that was transporting goods to the docks on the water.
And if you go back even further, the reason they built the raised railway through the west side of Manhattan is because 10th Avenue, where the trains originally ran, was known as Death Avenue, because so many people were dying, getting run over by trains, that New York actually hired cowboys to ride in front of the trains with red flags and try and wave people out of the way so they would not, So New York was this manufacturing city, and there were all these trains, and then as trucks started to come along, all of a sudden the railways were slightly less trafficked. But first they had to build this massive metal, essentially secondary road for the trains. And the trains actually went in and out of buildings. They would, so the High Line has had 3 lives at least. One was before the High Line when the trains killed people. Then they built this metal thing and they put the trains up top, and that worked for a while. And then the trains went away because trucks replaced them. And so all of a sudden they had this massive metal, dilapidated, rusting steel structure, which has now become, I mean, I won't say it's as important a landmark as Central Park, but it's awfully close.
It's become iconic, and I have an attachment to it because I spent years working at Chelsea Piers. And so I remember being like going when it first opened, and it was just the initial stretch. And then they've expanded it since. So I've taken my lunch breaks on that park. I have I got married like a block away, and was trying to figure out with my wedding photographer how I was going to get some shots on the Highline. Yeah, I have a lot of emotional attachment to that part of the city.
And in some ways, it's also a spectacular tourist attraction. I mean, people absolutely love going to it.
It's been an incredible place during the pandemic because they have had timed entrances, and what is normally like pretty crowded actually is now like, it's not empty, but you can be up there with maybe only 5 or 6 other people, which I haven't experienced in years.
And the other thing about the Highline story, we won't get into the 2 founders who are also, it's a spectacular story of civic engagement, but they made a decision which they stuck with from the very earliest days, that none of the building, it created enormous wealth for anyone that owned crappy warehouse property on the west side of Manhattan, which was essentially valueless. And all of a sudden there was this beautiful park that stretched through the west side. But they made a decision that none of those buildings on either side of the High Line could enter or exit directly to the High Line.
Mm-hmm.
And so while if you own one of those spectacularly expensive apartments looking out over the Hudson River and looking out of the High Line, you can see it and it still creates enormous visual beauty and value, you can't just walk out of your front door and be on the High Line, because then it would have essentially been, a private park for wealthy people.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that when you looked at that building or something, we were maybe talking $30-$40 per square foot, and now it's maybe $1,800 per square foot. Like that's how much the property in the area has appreciated. I don't think anyone understands real estate in New York City, but we're talking about like, if you want to rent a 1-bedroom in this neighborhood, you're looking at least $5,000. If you want to buy a 1-bedroom apartment, you're looking at north of $2 million.
Yeah, you're just saying this because you're enjoying the pain that's causing me, that my lack of vision. I mean, I literally could have bought the apartment and rented it out, covered my mortgage, and just sat on it for 10 years and made a quadrillion dollars.
But you're going to do that now with Bitcoin, right, Steve?
All right. So sidebar, but funny note, somebody posted on Facebook the other day, if you could go back in time and speak to your 18-year-old self, what are 3 words you would tell your 18-year-old self? And somebody posted, things get better, and somebody else posted dreams come true, and I posted buy more Bitcoin. Buy more, for fuck's sake, just buy more Bitcoin. All right, so we're gonna look at some Highline pictures here. I remember, I have to find it, but I was up there once before it was turned into a park. I don't remember why. For some shoot we were working on, but there is a subtext to this podcast, which is that making change in an urban landscape takes time and vision and stick-to-itiveness. Is that too chit-chatty a word? Is that
dedication, commitment,
yeah, all those things.
relentlessness, resilience.
Yes. Having said that, here's the other thing, and then we'll get to Little Island as our last chapter. Central Park and the Highline, while they both have historic ties to each other, are dramatically different experiences.
Yeah.
I mean, Central Park feels, if you don't think about the history, entirely natural. Like just magically this bucolic, rambly, complicated space just was sitting there, and all New York really had to do was essentially protect it, and it was fine, which is not even remotely true.
Right.
The explosives being a clue about that, right? And trying to figure out back then how the designer said, let's blow up and remove all of this rock, but let's leave these outcroppings of rock, quote, natural. And then they also brought some rocks in, I guess. I don't remember that. But the Highline is much more of a crafted experience. Garden.
It's like urban landscape art.
Yes. But the only thing that really exists from its previous life is the nature of this metal snake kind of weaving through the city.
They found preserved some tracks too along the way.
But there is something about that being in green space inside of the towering buildings that is uniquely New York. No dogs allowed on the Highline, very sad. No bicycles on the Highline, very sad. Totally logical.
It would be too crowded though. Yeah.
No, it would be. So let's move to the latest of these stories, which is complicated in its own right. This is called Little Island. And here, let me get some pictures. So I have not yet been to Little Island.
And it's not too far from the Highline. It's on the west side.
Nope. And it is unusual on a whole bunch of levels. It is kind of a modern dock space. It's these tulipy pillars with little round cup-shaped bits of dirt.
It kind of looks like a mushroom.
It does kind of look like a mushroom. Funded and built by Barry Diller.
And his wife too, right?
Yes,
no?
the family. Yes,
Diane von Furstenberg.
Von Furstenberg. Yes.
Sorry, I'm also I'm very conscious of the wives in the billionaire landscape.
Yeah, no, she is a entrepreneur very much in her own right. The inventor of the wrap dress, among other things. Inventor maybe isn't right. Designer. But Diller Island, as I call it, Little Island seems to be the name, but I'm not sure that'll stick, is going to be this public space. It opened a week ago. It's got time ticketing, much because people were worried about essentially falling off the edge of it into the water. I'm kidding, of course. I know people who've gone and think it's spectacular. The New York Times wrote a surprisingly positive review of it, but it has critics.
I think it's polarizing in the way that the vessel is. So we don't have time to get into Hudson Yards on this podcast, but that structure that some people call the shawarma, right? It looks like a big piece of meat. Some people think it's beautiful. Some people think it's hideous.
I think the question about Diller Island that is unknown here, we're looking at a sky view, and you can see there's a kind of a bowl-shaped performance space. I think it will come down to how is the space programmed.
I mean, it looks like a video game.
It's interesting. So I have an interesting Diller story that I think is relevant to Little Island. So across the street is the IAC headquarters. This white translucent building, not quite across the street, but in that general area. There's a famous story that when the designers brought Barry Diller the design of the building, it was shown to him in plastic, the first design. And the plastic was white and translucent because that's what architects use when they were designing shapes. And Diller said to the designer, I like that. And he said, yeah, well, once it's actually we have the next design, you'll see it's going to be clear glass. And Diller said, no, I want it to be white translucent. And the designer said that there's no such thing as white translucent architectural glass. And Diller said, make it so.
It was very Steve Jobs-esque of him.
Yes. So presumably this island has the same, the same Barry Diller putting himself kind of in the design process, although he doesn't talk much about that.
Yeah.
The pictures I've seen look quite gorgeous.
And again, if you've never seen the IAC building, it kind of looks like a glacier, but when you catch it at a specific angle, what you can appreciate is that it was architected to look like a boat with 3 sails. And so it has that curvature built into it.
So here's, I think, the question. Central Park, open to the public, no time ticketing, no limits to getting in or out of it. The only time it gets crowded is when they do those big concerts on the Great Lawn, in which case there is a fence put up and you have to have tickets. The Highline, somewhere in the middle, there's entry points. During COVID, there were time tickets, but I think mostly you can just enter it. And then Diller Island, Little Island, because there's only one entry point and you don't want to get overcrowded, and most people want to go there at sunset because it's gorgeous at sunset. Maybe we'll always have time tickets. What do you think?
I think it'll go away. I think it's like a COVID thing. I think it's an opening and there's a lot of buzz around it thing. It'll eventually be used in the way that the Dumbo waterfront is.
I need more data there. How is the Dumbo waterfront used?
No, like people just go there and it does experience more crowds like around sunset, but eventually just sort of becomes another place that you can go.
By the way, I'm just looking at this picture now. I didn't realize there actually is an entrance and an exit. That's, I think, probably for safety reasons as well. But you're right. It does look a little like a video game. It has kind of like curvy little park paths.
Like you want to get like a little go-kart or something.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely. So I have tickets for the middle of June. I'm definitely going. Excited to go and see it and experience it, and excited to feel like New York is kind of coming back to life. Like the timing of the fact that Diller Island is opening just as masks are coming off. I think that's pretty cool. All right, so we're just about out of time. So what have we learned on this little journey?
Take nothing for granted, and that the New York City is malleable, and if you want to influence how we interact with the physical world around us, there's a precedent for that.
Yeah, I'm going to be slightly more sharp than that, which is, I think it's important. This gets back to my government conversation, which is, nothing happens organically. I mean, all of the natural parks have been protected, and pathways have been put in, and and bathroom facilities and parking lots, and like none of it's just like I'm going. I mean, yes, you can go to the desert, sure. Like there are places you can go that are, much rawer, but the idea that New York is both a built environment and a natural environment, and that humans have played a massive role in all of those things, I think is really important. And the fact that the west side of Manhattan used to be trains running on the island, and then trains running on tracks above the island, and then trains gone and empty tracks, and now a park, is a great little TikTok journey, right? I mean,
Yeah.
like what will come next? And the river's been cleaned up, and the water's almost kind of swimmable. I don't know if swimmable is the right word, but like you can kayak in it.
Yep.
And it's also why, just to put a bit of a button on this, is New York dead meme that lasted about 3 seconds was absurd, because it's not.
No one can ever count out New York.
Agreed. Well, that was fun. On a rainy Memorial Day weekend, we got to go to the park.
Yeah, and hopefully if the weather's nice tomorrow, go outside. Actually, listeners should check out the Botanic Gardens up in the Bronx. There's a cool art exhibit up there.
Yes. And there's a zoo in Central Park.
There's a zoo in Central Park. Yes.
Yes.
We're no shortage of outdoor spaces in New York City.
All right. We are out of time. Alexa, have a fabulous week.
Happy Memorial Day.
See you.